Welcome back to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich. Today in the house, physically in St. Michael, is Mr. Skip. Boy, that was bad. I just been calling you Skip for so long.
That's all right.
You're
Mr.
just
Skip? I don't know.
Let's go. Skip,
Few of the kids' friends call me that.
That's what they do.
And I'm like, who are they talking to? No.
Like, with two P's or one?
One P.
One P. All right. So, last name?
Johnson.
Oh, yeah, he has a last name.
Yeah.
This is Skip Johnson. I'm like, I do know who you are.
Got it.
I didn't find you off the street. Wow. You know what's amazing, Skip? And we're going to get into your intro here in a second. We have 69 mutual connections, I found out. It's like, who's this guy?
And yeah, on LinkedIn.
Yeah, on LinkedIn.
And most of them were like, we're actually in deep relationship with a ton of those people.
Like, I didn't know that. Did you
Yeah.
know that? Like, I'm friends with this guy. Did you connect him or did I connect you?
Yeah.
So, Skip Johnson, thanks for being on the show. So pumped to have you.
Great to be here.
Great offline chat and learned a lot more about you going deeper. But we have such a similar story, and I hope today we get a chance to express all of what God might have in this journey together we've had. But why don't you introduce yourself, Skip Johnson? I know husband, father of 3. How many girls?
Yeah. So, husband
The whole thing,
of
yeah.
15, almost 16 years.
Dang.
So coming up on 16 years, 7 of the best years ever.
Yep.
No, just kidding.
At least half, close to.
Yeah, 3 daughters. So I've got a 14-year-old, 11-year-old, 9-year-old. They're amazing, but we're also in this whole new season. Like
Yeah,
it's
man.
easy at home, and then I got a teenager.
Yeah, right.
So we're working through all that.
That's great. That's great. Well, I can relate to the teenager. Not that many girls, though. Mine are all boys. I have one girl, so I'll have to learn from the master when it's time. But what's awesome about what I've got to learn just a little bit from you today, but then from our integration of our connections, is that this pursuit of success in your life and then the ongoing pursuit of other things that would also be called success maybe weren't as important at once upon a time, but have become more clear in your mind as you're going through this journey. How do you currently define success? But maybe start with, at a very high level, what it used to look like.
Yeah.
You know, because I think that's the piece we all can go, yeah, I relate to that.
You use the word integrate, and
Yeah.
I use the word integration a lot. So I'm passionate now about, making sure my life, ministry, business, success, health would exist in an integrated, complete or more complete, right? We're not complete on this side of heaven.
Yeah,
But, I think at some point I saw the name of your podcast and I'm like, oh, Successfully Unsuccessful. I immediately know what that means.
Right.
I have been there.
Yeah.
I've had, made a lot of money, had a lot of headlines, accolades, was a founder of a wealth management business where within about 8 years, we were managing more than $1 billion. I had 50 plus team members, Inc. 5000, Minnesota Fast 50, best places to work, and a lot that came with that in the wealth management business. It's like wined and dined and accolades and paraded across stages, and there was an awful lot about that I loved. My ego really loved the validation that the business world gave me, but it never satisfies. Every time you move ahead there. Dan Sullivan, founder of something called Strategic Coach, a lot of entrepreneurs are in his group. He has this idea, the gap in the gain. It's this idea that as you move along, you're always focused on something down the line. And it's like thinking about moving toward the horizon. The horizon always moves. So you got to look back at where you came from. But the problem is if I'm always putting what I think is success out there and it's some thing, money, number, first of all, it always moves. You're never satisfied. And if my baseline is I learned later that I literally thought I had to be successful. I had to perform. I had to deliver results. Or I'd be rejected, was like what counseling showed me.
Right.
So, it's a treadmill. It's a constant unhappiness because you always actually have to hit the next level now to feel satisfied. And by the time you get there, somebody you wanted to make $100,000. By the time you get there, now you got friends making 200, 250. You want to, I just got there. Now it's 250, and then it's 500, and then it's $1 million, and now you got friends with private jets, and you're like, oh, that's an exousting thing.
Hamster wheel.
If I were to give the headline, it's like founder of a company that was incredibly successful, was somewhat of a public figure at a different, point in my life to around the same time, got very, very close to imploding my marriage. Things I ended up having to confess to my bride that were very painful. And man, the other parts is with that drivenness, with that hard working, I would run people over. I was intimidating. People didn't feel heard. And John Eldredge, we're both fans of John Eldredge and Wild at Heart. I'm sure more to come on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But he uses the phrase poser. I was just a massive poser. Like my posing was trying to look like I have it together. Got to wear the right thing. Don't look stupid. Be smart enough. And even like deceit that tries to portray myself a certain way versus just, the successful, maybe me now, isn't as successful in some areas, but is getting to live in a more wholehearted, authentic way.
So good. In that life, we're all invited to.
Yeah.
It's a life of freedom, right? It truly is. And it's interesting because freedom is what everyone's after. But we're calling it the American dream freedom.
Yeah.
Success, comes from peace. What is the American dream anymore now? The phrase is, I
don't know.
Pursuit of happiness.
I was going to say 2.3 kids and a white picket fence.
Yeah, right. All those things, that goalpost has moved. It can't keep up.
Right.
But that freedom found in Christ, where your soul is in sync with what he might have for you, to be who he made you to be, without looking through the lens of the flesh, of the damages that we then put up, these guardrails, these things that keep us from being vulnerable, the filters that we only allow certain people to see, right? The posers in us. And what a radical, and we'll talk about Wild at Heart, we might as well go right into it. But what we're talking about now through the lens of this is identity. At the core of this is who we are, and is not about what the lies we believe, because I think so many of us think about, we don't maybe call them lies, but we've started to believe things about ourselves that are untrue, because the world says when this, then this. And if success is defined by that, and if you're not that, then you're this.
Yeah.
So let's reframe that. Identity in Christ. How do you redefine success? Or what are you learning, or what is Jesus teaching you now about success, literally right now, but then maybe from an eternal perspective too?
Yeah, we got into, my story a little bit, and I said there's like the headline version. So grow this company,
right.
Had a successful exit in 2020. I'm a partner in a real estate firm. I coach some amazing businesses. Like there's that version that that sounds pretty impressive.
Sounds great.
You're like a partner in a private equity real estate fund.
I still want to know you.
Yeah. So it sounds cool. And then the other aspect was that sale came out of, I was going to say looking in the mirror, but it actually came out of my business partners holding a mirror up. And there was a time in there that they said, we love you. We don't really like being in business with you. And some of it was unfair, and some of it was labels that they tried to put on me that weren't all accurate. And I won't go into the details, but there was a statement where basically, one of them just said, Skip, I feel like you think you're better than me. And it connected my head to my heart, which has been a tension and something I learned to do more and better over time. But I started to realize that there were times that the way I showed up in, and we'll get there, but in a false self versus the real Skip, at times left a wake of destruction. And this was 2020. Maybe we're back. We're not in lockdown anymore, but COVID's still a real thing. I remember texting my mom. And I was like, Mom, can you send me, do you have any pictures of me when I was a little kid? Because I was like, I don't know who I've become. I'm pretty sure that at some point in my life, I became a performing good boy. What I mean by that is I found what the world elevated as success or what was celebrated. I became a lot of that, and I wasn't sure actually who I was.
Wow.
And so looking back at these pictures and seeing this sweet, gentle, kind, kid, and I mean, there's parts of my story that I was I'm 6'5", so most people don't expect this, but I was a high school and college wrestler and really a standout athlete.
Did not expect that.
In those areas. But like, you had to be tough. Like, the gentle boy is not celebrated in that world. So like, I wanted to become, tough and probably intimidating, and wanted people to respect me. And like, there was this dichotomy of like, God, who did you intend when you intended me? Mm-hmm. And who have I become, and who am I becoming? That was the kind of start of, can I just, like, me and Jesus, how he thinks about me, can I move toward him, move toward that? And the beautiful reality is, I don't need to be anything for him to love me. But I didn't love myself a lot of the time. So it was that process that maybe has helped me become much more wholehearted, and thus, successful in other ways, where I get to show up in a real wholehearted way to love my daughters and my wife. And I'm still a work in progress, man. Like, dude, and will be on this side of heaven.
For real. And even when you feel like you arrive, you're humbled, and what you just said to me reminded me of not even a week ago, no joke. And this idea of I love you, Skip, but I don't like you, and because of how you show up. And we talk about this, sometimes how we're portrayed based on our own agendas, and we're just driven by this motor to whatever it is, and we forget love, right? And that's the number one key piece of the fruit of the Spirit is the first
love.
fruit, love. And a lot of scriptures support this. But here's what my wife said to me. It was like, here we go again with this holier than thou. And it was like, even today, right? And I know this about myself too, and I'm sure you're more self-aware than ever how you may be coming across. So therefore, what do? You lean into it and lead vulnerably by saying, hey, I want you to know, right? If you hear from me, I don't think I know it all. I don't think that I'm holier than thou, but I aspire to be better because Jesus set the standard. If I had come across that, I am sorry. I know it hurts. I know sometimes it looks like I'm condemning you. I will swallow that. I will own that.
Yeah.
And leading like Jesus for me has said, you know what? I used to be the guy who would say, no, I'm not. I would defend it. They used to call me Hulk in the boardroom, and then Bruce Banner would come back. You know? And so like, I'm just curious on your thoughts on that. Are you still, in some ways, do you feel like there's a version of you that comes out, not because you let it out or because you're trying for it to come out, but you're self-aware. And so therefore you now go, okay, I'm just going to set the stage here. It may sound like this, but I'm going to be very clear. He gets all the credit, right?
Yeah.
Do you feel like work in progress, that is still a real statement in some ways, and maybe in different others, but
some of the process for me is I've discovered most of the time the people I'm around or working with or my wife doesn't need from me the perspective or the challenge. Often they need acceptance, attunement, connection, affirmation first.
Boom.
And once they feel seen and loved, like even at times, here's the formula for growth according to a guy named John Townsend. John Townsend wrote Boundaries with Henry Cloud. If you ever read that book, Necessary Endings, a lot of brilliant books. But he says the formula for growth is grace, truth, and time. So if I were to look at my life and think about the fruit I was producing, I was at a spot where a lot of the fruit that came out wasn't great. Some of the fruit, somebody told me once, she was like, it's kind of like it's artificial fruit, like you put that fruit there. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, because the other headline version was on the trustee board at my church, deeply passionate about the kingdom. God, I love to be generous. And there's like the real part of that. And then there is an aspect of, did I write the check to get
right
because somebody would see it?
Right.
Like there's some
always,
and there's a tension of like both heads of the coin there. So grace, truth, and time. My fruit wasn't great, but you can't yell at a tree to produce new fruit. Like that's not how it works in the kingdom, or go to your apple tree in the yard.
Right.
So what happens is you need to make sure first it starts with the soil. So in my process, like in that kind of icky breaking point, I call it this. it was a dirt road experience where I ended up face down with Jesus crying, and I call it a breakthrough. My wife says it was sort of a breakdown for me back then, but like
breakthrough sounds a little better.
Yeah, but we started to dig in the soil.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that was like, what are the nutrients? It was counseling, it was therapy, it was family of origin. And think about Jesus in the Bible yelling at, there's a story of the landowner who said, there's no fruit on this, like tear it up, burn it. And the landowner says, whoa, or the steward says, whoa, like give me some time. Let me dig around the soil a little bit. Basically, let me fertilize it. And if there's no fruit a year from now, we can tear it down. So a lot of times it starts with grace. And then, yes, truth. But it's hard to metabolize truth until I first have the grace and feeling of acceptance. And then the other part we forget about is time. Like, Josh, you frickin' did it again.
There it is.
Why'd you do it again?
Right.
Well, sometimes it takes time for transformation.
Why
the
grace has to happen.
So grace, truth, and time.
Yep.
So yes, I have this tendency, and I think a lot of men do. We jump to perspective and advice and challenge.
Yeah.
But a lot of times what people need first is acceptance and attunement. And hey man, I've been there.
Dude, that's
and
so good.
Like just the other part is like I have been there.
Yeah.
I've been there.
So what I love about what you said, and it brings me to a lot of thoughts, and could be dangerous because technically this could be a Joe Rogan fashion, you know. But you said so many good things. But I've learned recently too in counseling, and you know, we are a work in progress, and we still do this because I want my good marriage to become great. And there's still a lot of reconstruction, deconstruction had to happen, but some of the reconstruction in parallel in some ways too, right? But what you said there, you're talking about this idea of saying what you want to say as opposed to just being the person to listen, and then responding by repeating back what she said, not your opinion, not your insights. And so it's very, very important. And if I told you about what I learned at 39 and what I learned at 40 was, holy cow, why didn't they teach me that I just need to say back to my wife what she said?
Yeah.
I mean, that's dating 101. It should be, right? But like, they just want to be heard and understood and loved. And then, so as maybe this has happened for you, honey, thanks for sharing all that. What would you like me to do? Would you like my feedback? Would you like my opinion? Or do you just want me to listen?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm glad you asked that. Just listen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How about you? You know? So, Skip, a lot of pieces here. Counseling for you. Why did you start? And what is it doing for you now still? Yeah. You're still doing it. Yeah.
I mean, I felt like I said, who have I become? You know, there's a great movie. We watched the trailer of it once at a retreat. It's with Tom Cruise and it's Jerry Maguire. And at the start, he has this part and he actually says, break down, break through. Like, who would I become? Just another shark in a suit, you know, like, and he was wrestling with this tension. And so there was an aspect of, I really wanted to know. I was a little just reeling in some ways. And so God, like, who did you intend when you intended me, when you designed me? Like, I have a deep belief that for everybody listening, God has designed you in a unique way with his fingerprints. And when we find the habitat for that, we'll thrive. But so good. You know, like Albert Einstein says this, but like, everyone's a genius, or he said this, probably 80 years ago. Everyone's a genius, but if a fish judges its ability or judges its genius by its ability to climb a tree, it will go through life thinking it's stupid. Like, a fish wasn't designed to climb a tree. Right. So some of that was deconstruction. Wow. Some of that was, I know this fruit. Like, I didn't want to show up this way. Right. I don't want to show up looking like I'm better than other people. Right. And the other reality was, I mean, this is real. My wife in late 2020 said, Skip, she said, I recently heard the word narcissist and I didn't really know what it meant. And I looked it up and I saw a blog and it said something like being married to a narcissist. And she said, and when I read it, and she was scared to say this, and I'm sad about that. She said, I saw a lot about being married to you. And
wow, man.
I was in a like a gentle enough spot in my spirit. Probably some of it was
your soil was a little fertile.
It was a little that instead of just the defensive part, which is like, no, because if somebody said something bad about me, if I'm not perfect, I might not be accepted. It's a whole deal. Like,
yeah, for sure.
I love counseling. It's
so good.
I never was okay going to it because I thought that meant you're broken. And now I believe it's actually maintenance that's necessary for thriving. But I remember I got on my knees and I just said, I'm so sorry that I've been showing up that way. And then I remember even bringing that to counseling, and my coach, therapist, Matthew, said, Skip, I'm not going to let you put the label narcissist on. He goes, however, there are some times that maybe through a narcissistic wound in your past, you would show up with these tendencies. He's like, so we're not going to take that as a label. You're not a narcissist. He goes, actually, I know you deeply love people, but there are times you show up in this way, and let's get to work. And then he also had this part. He just said, grace to you, Skip, grace to you. And wow. I felt like I could be totally real and still be accepted and work on that. And, if you visit with Amy today, there will be times there's times I still show up not the best. But that is not who she experiences when she experiences me. But it's been time. This is 5 years, 4 years removed from that conversation.
With hard work.
Yeah, God, we on our offline, we talked about how God often works through an encounter and a process. So we have amazing experiences. I had a tear-filled, worship service. I had and I look back, and there were times that my harsh inner judge would look and be like, but I really love Jesus, and I had this encounter, and I chased after him. And yes, and it was real. And God in his grace also, I remember going on a walk and just feeling like a pile of crap. And he was like, just look up, child. There was a song by Lauren Daigle, and I was playing in my head. That's the one. And I remember I kept just like kind of looking up, and it was like, if I just look back at him, I'm back on track immediately. So like all those times I was looking and just being like, who, what, and I don't like who I've become. It was he in his grace. He was like, no, you really do love me, Skip. You really were chasing after me. Yes, you got off track a few times. But through the grace of knowing Jesus loved me, knowing that even this guy, Matthew, as a coach, counselor, therapist, cared for me, saw me, accepted me in the meantime, I was like, okay, I'm not perfect, but I can work on becoming and moving toward who God intended with me.
Man. And as you learn that about yourself, and I think what's amazing, and a few times now to call you out, but there's tissues there, some of the best guys I've been meeting over the last couple of years, and I say that just so wholeheartedly, like a friend of ours that Mick, and this has been happening to me.
Yeah.
And I see it, and I see it, and actually the last guy that sat right there, same thing. And it's like this tenderheartedness where we start to think about and see other people through the lens of Jesus, and we break for them. We break for their pain.
Yeah.
And so when we recognize the areas that we're not showing up like him, and we're bridging that gap all the time, and then when we think about the times in our past that we've broken through, to your point about anchor and that horizon changing, and we don't have that baseline, and we go, holy cow, he did it once, he'll do it again. And that's when your faith grows.
Yeah.
So get this, when you keep looking up, you're just reminding yourself that horizon is being anchored, right? What is true north is truly true north. And so this is why we have the word. And so if men just sat around and shared their lies and beliefs and tell stories like let's call it culture, and we don't have truth or a baseline, so think about what you were talking about, looking around and all over, and we can get distracted, but the word is a lamp into our feet and a light into our path, just enough to show us where we're going to stumble. Right. And so I love scripture for the purposes of teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training. And so I want to shift slightly into this idea of what success looks like. But again, we've talked about that word, but breaking it down to say, it's easy to wake up and run after working at a job. and not worry about the other things. Here's how I know that. 40 pounds overweight, angry, infidelity, spending money I shouldn't, convenience was really highly valued, right? Oh, that's not success. That's one area of financial success, paying off these other gods, right? Yeah. But the difference is healthier, mentally, spiritually, right? Time in the Word, physically working out. You're a busy guy, so we haven't even talked about some of the levels of success to be able to walk away and say, I have some runway to figure out life. I don't really think I'm going to retire. I'm going to build something great, but I'm going to figure that out. But in that journey of you becoming, you mentioned, what systems have you had to put in place, time and priority management wise, to really go, I can't be that guy anymore. Let me go back to reconstruction. And let's start with the calendar. Like, what does my day need to look like? Because I think people forget about designing of the life that's their ideal outcome. Would you share? And I just felt that was off the plan, but I think that would be something I would love to learn from you about how you've been able to do that and work on that.
Yeah, and I'm not perfect at it. There's some areas that have been over time less of a struggle. I enjoy working out. I enjoy how I feel when I eat healthier, right? So like some of those things have become a very just regular lifestyle. And I'll look ahead because my calendar can vary a little bit, right? I got off a flight yesterday. I was on a plane sometime last week. So it doesn't always fit into a perfect thing, but I'll give you an example. So earlier this week, I'm in California. And to start the morning, I'm looking at a full day full of stuff. Actually, cool area. We're in this place called Sutter Creek, California, and Airbnb I'm staying at. It's in Amador City. It's 3 miles away. Little walk through the mountains, or I could have taken the highway. And I'm with somebody else, and I just got up early, and I went, and it took roughly an hour for me to walk to where this offsite, retreat that we're having is, and so in a time like that, it's like literally was like, otherwise I'm gonna go all day. And this is going to be full with people and meals and dinner and conversations till late and a lot of goodness in that. But I just knew that my soul needed some Jesus time. So I got up, I had my, phone in my pocket, had my AirPods. I did a pause from the pause app from Wild at Heart. I did some of that. Just spent time actually enjoying beauty, moving my body. So I didn't get my crush it on my Peloton or tonal or squat rack workout, but I was still moving my body and getting Jesus time. I knew, left to my own devices, because I am an extrovert, I'm going to be with these people, we're going to converse, I'm going to talk, and I'm going to look up at the end of the day and I'll have had no Jesus time. So that was maybe slightly inconvenient, but I was glad I did it. The other stuff I do, and I'm just about to turn 40, got saved when I was 4, and it was a real thing. Okay. So 36 years of following Jesus, and I haven't read through the entire Bible in a year. I am loving the Bible recap project, which is just 15 minutes or so a day.
Really?
I'm finding myself it's 7-8 minutes of reading. It's a quick 7-minute video. And I'll get through the Bible this year. But I'm just finding a hunger for scripture where literally I'm reading ahead several days, or I'm being oh man, we're talking about this. And I'm reading through whole chapters sometimes in a sitting and going, oh my word, I know the word of God,
right?
But just the context and the dots connecting has been fun. But that's cool. To do that, I have 3 kids, right? We bring them to school. I love to have that be part of my process where I bring them to school. Well, it just means they're getting ready by 7 because we leave the house at X time. I need to have been done with my quiet time by a certain time so that I can be a present dad. And I screw it up a lot. Amy would love, I did make breakfast for the kids this morning, but Amy would love if more often I was actually helping them get their lunches ready and whatnot. But it's that intention, I have to get up earlier
to make it happen.
Or it's not going to happen.
Yep.
So I don't know.
Great.
I guess that's the big part. So I just look at the calendar, and I do try to break it down. This is a Dan Sullivan thing from Strategic Coach, but he talks about focus days. That's where you're in your unique ability, making the cash register ring if you're a business person. Buffer days is there is stuff I have to do. So I was on a call earlier today with my assistant. We're looking at the calendar, there's a whole bunch of things that are like tasks I still have to do, right? I don't love them. Actually, I kind of want to poke my eyes out when I think about doing them, trying to eliminate those. But there's still stuff I have to do. And then free days, creative days, fun days. Like, it isn't just take a day off and I'm going to do strategic planning. It's like literally what fills my cup. So Sabbath would be my way of calling it a free day, right?
Okay.
Like, we try to be super intentional with the Sabbath. And I mean, I'm like, Amy and I will be like, we're going to order pizza. We're going to have a bottle of wine. We're going to like intentionally just like settle in. We might watch movies. Like, it's not all full of Jesus, but it's full of us like resting, reflecting, being, and it's, our kids love Sabbath days. Now,
Which
we're
day do
not
you do it?
perfect,
Yeah.
but we don't do it all the time, but we really are getting better at intentionally prioritizing
Making
that.
it a thing.
So that's a
So
big one.
do you try to do it weekly? Is it on the calendar as a plan? Do you like a Saturday or a Friday or do a Sunday?
Yeah, we would tend to, it's a little challenging right now with some of the sports schedule.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it'll start basically Saturday night. We go to church Sunday morning, but like no devices, no whatever. Just intentional family time. That's like great. Some of that's like, I go out and I hang out in the sauna and just, stuff that fills me up. Like, man was not made for the Sabbath. Sabbath was made.
I was just going to say that.
Shoot,
Sabbath was made for the man.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, is that right from the Bible?
Yeah, that is.
There we go.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny because have you heard of the, oh my gosh, that's terrible. It's not supposed to happen. Okay, I'll come back to it. It's a podcast that it's exploring the Eastern versus Western view, and really helps you give clarity and context to the men of Egypt that were bricklayers found their worth and how many bricks they could build, right? And so then now they're in the desert and trying to understand that there's this purpose for their life and it's not measured in brick building. And so this is like has to be a reminder, right? Like, Bema, B-E-M-A podcast. A good friend of mine showed it to me. Amazing. So great stuff there, unpacking the intentionality around being present with your family, practicing Sabbath, some great things, and then finding just knowing that things aren't perfect, that your schedule is variable, but you have a greater plan for the areas of your life that you want to focus on improving in, right? So there was seasons for years, I would tell you, I didn't think about many of those things, right? Like, when is counseling? There was no counseling. Like, I have to fit that in. Well, time with the Lord in the morning. How do you fit that in? I wasn't working out. Like, I just worked, And so hearing you talking about some of that even is great reminders to even if it's small and not perfect, it's starting with intentionality. So speaking of, so you get to a place, 10 years building, almost 10 years of very fast growing wealth management group, large assets under management, have some partners, realize seasons of your life, maybe it would be best to transition, to maybe cash out and see something that was happening or things that were happening to focus on you and your family, but really not really sure what, but just being optimistic that you could work on yourself and this timing was happening. That's this level of financial success, perhaps this bridge. But then it became about, well, now what? Let's talk about how, and we're talking about 2020-ish, right?
Yeah.
Where, and I think I asked the question, $100 million shows up. You have a choice now. What do you do with your time? Because you don't need the money. What do you do with your time? What do you do with your abilities? What do you do with, creating legacy, right? So if everyone has that blank slate, and it's hard because your circumstances are, filtering through our answer, right? Like, well, that's hard to say because, and then you would start realizing why. But blank slate today, all your financial problems are solved. You experience some of this. And what people would say, wow, dude, it must be great. And you're like, well, there was a lot of work to get here, a lot of pain to get here, a lot of effort, and things that I'm still working on. Jump us into that spot, which I think leads us to some of the back half of the journey of where you're at now. And I think we can kind of segue into how we integrate purpose-driven life with this idea of, hey, my success doesn't have to be a choice that's mutually exclusive from success in my marriage and being a good husband and being healthy. I don't have to choose, right? We had this great convo. So let's start, boom, you're somewhat financially free. You have a runway. The path to getting there and then forward, what happened? What did that look like for you?
Well, that Bema podcast,
Yeah.
that idea of my value is in bricks laid,
Yeah.
you know, my value would have been in the AUM that I managed and where we fit on lists. And then you get done and you're like, now what? Okay. So even in the, my coach counselor, Matthew. So I use this like loosely because I have a therapist that I
make
go
sure we
to,
call it out. Right?
dig in, like EMDR, something
Yeah.
that's been amazing.
Yeah.
And then this coach, actually, he comes from a counseling background, so it's a more like therapeutic approach. So he's kind of like a coach counselor. I found myself having conversations because part of it is you don't just sell and walk. You have to like work yourself out of a thing.
Right.
Now, in that case, I had clients I worked with, and I'm telling them, hey, I know you thought I'd be your wealth manager for, you know, ever, and now I'm out, and why, and there were reasons. So like, it wasn't, I would say it wasn't my idea to exit. It was God's. It was the most, I did take a sabbatical where it was a season of focusing on kind of getting healthy. I remember being really excited thinking about re-engaging in a business, especially because we had a wonderful platform build of like, what would it look like for me to re-engage now from a healthy standpoint? Like there was a, you know, finish line, and now I'm healthy and I will go, you know,
Finish the race
or whatever. But out of nowhere, I'm actually listening to some speaker at a thing for my kids' school, and God says, you won't be at Great Waters Financial anymore, or Great Waters, which, what? I literally, like, I looked up and I'm like, what? That was crazy. And then it was this immediate impression in my heart, but you have the time and margin to be involved in what matters. I was like, whoa, okay. Kind of sounds exciting. My soul was like, I think I was really in a season of beginning to learn and understand the voice of God. Part of it was I had this wonderful benefit of a sabbatical where I got to slow down for a period of time and like spend time with Jesus, because it is the still small voice. And if you're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, you're not going to hear it very often. But like, whoa, that was crazy. Telling Amy, I think we're going to sell. And she's like, okay, what's next? I don't know. Like, I don't know. In fact, the tension of, am I supposed to be in ministry now? Cause like, I love Jesus, and like, maybe I shouldn't have been in the business world. Maybe I should do Jesus stuff. I don't know, you know, like, so that tension, when I was transitioning these clients, they would ask, so what's next?
right? And you could say at that time,
Well, the truth is I didn't know. What I found myself saying was things like, you know, I'm not totally sure. Fortunately, Amy and I don't have to worry about money for a long. So I was saying things like that to be like, I've been financially successful. Clearly, like, look at me. And then there were times I would say things like, I don't know, maybe we'll end up in ministry. I realized both of those things that I would say, the like one appearing altruistic, the one appearing successful, even if there was some truth, it was actually about me. I remember Matthew saying, Skip, what if you just said, I don't know what's next? We're really trying to discern that. Stop. That was like dying to self over and over and over again. But it was so good for me to not express what was next, to have these people look at me like, really? Like, you're like, just gonna, yep.
I hear you. I would do the same. I mean, right? You're calculating what you hope that they feel or think about you.
I wanted to still protect my image, and that was like, well, we're not sure. Okay.
Right.
So, I'm sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought.
You're
so
good.
where we were going, you know, then from that was a process of then, what is my identity if it isn't just in the AUM that I manage?
Yeah.
In fact, with non-competes, I couldn't even work in that space that I used to be gifted in. So now what? The cool parts was a season of discovery. So, I mean, there's a thing called, you did a podcast a couple of weeks ago on Ikigai. So that concept, my pastor has a graphic that really gives you a bunch of questions kind of in more Jesus language, but like, what's the world need? What am I passionate about? Those kind of things. I started just being like, God, like, who did you design me to be? And I had some opportunities, and I got to go to work, you know, in some real estate stuff fairly early. But the tension was sitting in, I'm a work in progress. I don't know what my future thing is. I'm really uncomfortable because I want to run 1,000,000 miles an hour after a thing, and I don't know what the thing is. But I also ran 1,000,000 miles an hour after a thing and almost blew up my marriage, and my kids got the you know, leftovers for years. I was never at their events. Like, why? Because dad has to take a call. Dad has to be on a flight. Dad has a meeting. Dad has to be at the office. And I remember my wife asking me, she was like, I thought we started this business to have time and money. Seems like we have money, but we don't have any of your time. And we just want you. And my defensive posture at the time would have been like, babe, I'm doing it for you.
Right.
A friend of mine calls that the entrepreneurial lie. I'm doing it all for you, honey. No, I'm doing it because there was a boy inside of me that was running scared from scarcity, that was terrified of poverty, and some stuff that I've worked through a little bit. But like,
yes.
You get into this, into that, like I was missing the mark. And so you get this, I'm just going to tell the listeners, a sale is very disruptive. And I'm still like in process, but now, we're close to 5 years from when this process began. I get to look now with this, oh, God, I think what you might have been doing was this. And I'm still in a spot of the dots haven't all connected, but my season of 2020, 2021 was God asking the question, will you trust me and will you surrender? Now, I thought surrender, just very frankly, I thought surrender was like a one-time decision. I was going to surrender in this thing. He invited me to a lifestyle of surrender.
Totally, man.
And will you trust me? The answer now is much more like, yes, you can trust me. Like that's deeply in my heart. And so, man, I'm still figuring it out, but like, I know that I can trust God, and I'm seeing enough evidence that it's like, oh, I think you're actually working on something pretty freaking cool.
Right.
But you go into that, some of the things that have birthed out of our life, like Amy and I lead a small nonprofit, Riverbend Refuge, which just ended up being a byproduct. I see you got your Fathers for the Fatherless, bracelet on.
There
our friend Jeff Zog.
Yeah.
I sat down with him around that time, and I remember telling him, I started a story by saying, I'm a mess. And then I told him a story which had a bunch of what God was doing and also, the messy ickiness. And I ended with being like, so clearly I'm a mess. And he just stopped me and he said, Skip, like, stop it. He said, I want to challenge you. He's like, I got Holy Spirit goosebumps like 6 times in the last hour hearing what God was up to. You're not a mess. You're under construction, and construction can be messy. It can take longer than you thought. It can sometimes be more expensive than you thought. The neighbors might judge the mess, but I know we can trust the contractor here, the one who's designing this.
Yeah.
And so out of that, he said, it reminds me of this guy, Morgan Snyder, who wrote this book, Becoming a King, and With Wild at Heart. And I'm like, yeah, I read Wild at Heart 20 years ago. Yep. Good Christian boy. I read that, in high school or whatnot. And it just led me on this like new process of, wait, the podcast is stirring some things, is about restoring, kind of, digging in the soil. And from that, I shared it with you, like, how'd you start doing these retreats that you host? I went to the website. It's COVID, so you can't freaking do a live event. I want to go get fixed. I want to go like have John Eldridge and Wild at Heart Boot Camp fix me or something. But it does say host an event. And it just like lit up on the page. I let it sit for a week because I'm easily excitable.
Like, boom, squirrel, new
let's
thing.
Let's go. I'm a visionary,
You're
like
a visionary
squirrel
guy.
chaser.
That's the other angle we wanted to cover.
Yeah. So I sat on it for a week, and I'm like, I think like we have a property, we have a garage, we have a yurt. We could probably get a camper up there and sleep like 16 guys. This was before we purchased the farm. I think I need this, and I bet a few of my buddies could use this too. And so the first one was 16 people.
Wow.
You've been to the yurt?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
I actually haven't been to the yurt.
Okay, you didn't. Okay, I thought maybe we rode ATV trails and whatnot.
Nope.
Okay, anyway, it was one of the other properties up there. It's like our old family hunting shack. There's a bunch of guys there, some guys in a camper, guys in a cabin that our Bob Barlow was renovating. 16 guys and a screen and a sound bar and a garage and like meals from Costco that we could heat up in crock pots. And we had 16 guys like crying and experiencing Jesus. And I was like, whoa, this is, I don't know where this goes in my future, but this stuff matters.
Yeah.
And if I think about the adventure of my life, like risking love with these people to experience life change is like, I was like, whoa, I'm still in this discovery phase, but I'm pretty sure that I found a clue of part of what God has designed my life to do.
It's so awesome, man.
And so now hundreds of men, Mick, who I think's been on this podcast you know, they went to one of these retreats. They're doing amazing things now, walking in his identity with Jesus. And my wife leads captivating retreats through the women's version. It's like, we still have no idea where that leads to. We just say yes. And really we're like, we have a resource. We kind of cover most of the expenses. People come and they spend 4 days, and Jesus meets them on the shore of the Big Fork River, and something about that river makes people cry, I'm pretty sure.
I'll tell you about that river. I've been in that river. Funny story. So all that stuff you said is true and incredible. So this guy, Mick, right? Connected through other circumstances, has been hounding me to check this out because he's leading one now, excited to share. And I'm like, it's a little too much for me. My wife called it a cult. What are you going to do? But my 40th birthday was like the perfect excuse to say I can get away, you know. And I went from traveling all the time to never traveling. So I was like very particular that this is one of my only veto cards, perhaps. I would pull on her. And I will tell you, I was prepared and ready and went in with the head to say, Lord, and the heart to say, I don't know anything about this, but I want to discover who you are more. And I want it to shape how I think about my future. And I want to be changed again. And I want to continue to be changed. And so in the meantime, one byproduct of that change is I experienced a great sauna, amazing. You know, first thing I do when I get there is I meet a couple guys half naked in a sauna, walking out in the cold in May into a river with just boxers on. And I'm in the water, I'm shivering, I'm freezing. And Greg says to me, just stop shivering, Josh, relax. And I'm like, what do you mean relax? Okay, so eventually I start to like it. So now I'm doing this, and day 2, my fingers turn white. It's so cold, but the circulation wasn't coming back in my finger. So I go find Dr. Greg, and I said, I don't know what's going on, but my finger's white. I was in the water. He's pinching it. He's squeezing it. He's like, boy, I think that's vaginitis.
Greg would say that.
Is that bad? What do I do? So he started squeezing it, and finally it kind of came back to life. But I realized now, a year plus later, that it's a byproduct of ADHD meds that I take, by the way. Rare. But I say that to say, I take cold showers now, dude. Like, stupid as that sounds to anyone who says, what changed is that? Here's what it changed. Here's what I believed. Here's what I ended for lies that I would say this has been just so transformational in so many ways. That what it can do, the benefit of what some things in life can do, you don't really realize until you go through the pain of understanding what's on the other end. And being able to turn cold water on and develop a tolerance was a simple way to say, your body is not in control of your mind, right? So simple. And that's a very minor takeaway from the thing.
We're told, take every thought captive.
Bingo.
Which would suggest, if Jesus is right, that we actually can control our thoughts,
Boom.
right? Like we get to choose.
So now, how does that relate to anything? Well, it relates to the man who gets irritated and pissed off and doesn't love his kids or his wife, that his anger, when he recognizes when counseling, it allows you to start probing those questions and under the current of what's moving in your life, to recognize those thoughts that you need to take captive, to then do something with them, creates freedom and control, the kind that you would never experience just walking around life doing what you feel. You're not in control. You're a loose cannon, right? And so even as simple as that, I still do them. And it was just ridiculous. I met some incredible people that have been involved in my coaching business, some people that have been on this podcast, some people that I've become friends with. I'm meeting people that have been through the experience at your place. We're sharing the similar stories. And it's just this community that what you was a little tiny seed that was planted in you forever change your life and other people, right? So here's the deal. When you're successful financially, maybe that gives you a few more resources. Maybe you have the time to take some capital and reinvest it to outsource some of the things that you normally would do yourself, but you have capital. You have a property now that has been able to create a place for people to take time and find Jesus there and meet him in a unique way. And so are you in business? Are you in ministry? Well, what are we? We're called to both, the integrated life, the integration of our faith in all we do. So fast forwarding, right? So this is starting to work on you. Like, what does this look like? And you've had to put a few labels on it, right? Yeah. Put a bucket on it. Maybe it's a $10,000 loss. Maybe it might make $1 one time. But at the end of the day, that's not why you do it. But you know the greater impact not only is eternal, but in the relationships that are being cultivated, this community, this movement. And so I just saw a post. I was hoping I would remember to say this, and I'm not going to get it right. But becoming a king, finding like-hearted men, right, that are going in the same direction. When I meet a guy like you and your partners, and by the way, the jealousy word, I won't go as far as saying that, but you have a best friend that you're doing business with, you're doing life with. That is rare. Remember that. That is a value that is so incredible, because guess what? Many of us that are out here, we're doing life alone. And even though we think we have people, the surface level, superficial stuff that we encounter, when you're in the darkest trenches and in the highest highs and you got friends, great, you have a spouse, we have spouses, but when a man and other men are around you in that direction, lifting each other up, that is the church, right? And so when I say you're my brother, I mean, because we have Morgan would say, Dad, right? His son.
We got the same dad,
right? The same dad, right? So my brother, I call everybody that. I used to think it was just this hokey. I'm like, no, dude, we're on the same page, right? So I guess as we close here, man, I just want to hear your thoughts, kind of rounding that out, and what God has for you, how that translates into the coaching business and what you're doing, how you're still seeing things play out, because the hindsight is 20/20 on that encounter you had or that person you met. But we don't always know how it's going to be used. Steve Furtick, Elevation Worship guy, was like, sometimes when we keep running into the same roadblocks, it might be also because there's something in the story, in the journey, that we haven't been able to understand fully or go through completely for our heart to change and our mind to be ready to transform, right? So thinking about that, what does life have for you now? What are you doing now? How is your integration and your approach to helping businesses, but men? How do you find that snowballing? How do you find that becoming you, and maybe tying it with becoming a king? Because I always get that part. What does a king mean, right? So I think that would just bring us full circle.
I love that. And I want to validate, like, on your 40th birthday, you chose to go spend time with Jesus. Like, that's amazing and says a lot about what you want, the process God's got you on. So well done.
Thanks, man.
Here was the tension that I was sitting in, is I felt a little bit like a disaster. Basically, I'd gone from blind to my issues, thinking I'm pretty freaking good, it's like right? my wife should be, happy to be married to me, to like, ooh. So I didn't begin hosting things like Wild at Heart out of a position of, I've got it figured out, now let me show you. I just invited people in, and God has used us through a gift of hospitality to create an atmosphere, a safe place, and actually, and much more approachable now, like, just, I get to be me. And God uses that. So to anybody who thinks you need to have arrived before doing something, not necessarily.
You just got to start.
Now, there's that aspect, and then there's another part, which is Morgan in becoming a king. There's a part he's going to talk about in the book, which is the integrity of miles on the odometer. Where do I have the integrity of miles on the odometer in order to speak into something? So I remember, like, my pastor reaching out, hey, we want you and Amy to, lead a marriage retreat. Why? Because, I had a beautiful wife. Like, we were like picture perfect little family. I didn't feel like we were in a spot to offer from strength and from the integrity of miles on the odometer. So I remember saying no, even though my flesh really loved that our pastor called me and Amy to say, can you guys lead this thing? Now, the other interesting part is I do believe that God has a future. Part of, the farmhouse up at Riverbend burned down, and we have this blank slate to go, God, what are you thinking? And we believe part of it is it will be used for marriage retreats. That it'd be part of our redemptive story, gets to be used to love people. But, like, I'm not bringing that without the integrity of miles on the odometer. So it's like a tension of, you don't need to be perfect. And you know what? Like, be cautious, because you start walking into something without that's where the enemy will attack it. Okay? So how does this come together? I had believed a lie, and some of it had been thrust on me, that you have to choose between success at work and success at home. You're either going to be like grow something really significant, or, time and money freedom. You're almost going to have to choose like an advisory business. We call it a lifestyle business. So do I want to grow something great or have a lifestyle business? That is totally crap. The decision is not binary like that. If there is a binary decision, it's that you must choose to say, I'm going to prioritize my wife, my family, my integration. And I am defiantly unwilling to sacrifice that on the altar of success.
Amen. Right.
But when you make those kind of decisions, here's what it changes is when you begin to, I go, okay, I need to lead people well. I need to empower people. It can't be the skip show. So, I had the opportunity to, be a founder and a rainmaker and help lead one of the fastest growing companies in the country for a season of time. Through the transformation of like startup to adolescence to kind of whitewater to growing something that was pretty remarkable and had the scars to prove it. So now I see people with those same visionary tendencies where they're charging after, and I'm just like, oh, my brother. Like if I can catch some people before they get to, I alluded to something, but like I got to the hotel room of a woman that was not my wife. Like when I let that sit, there was a weird part of me that was actually sickly proud that I didn't cheat. And then I realized, no, I did. And I had to confess that. Like I got there. You don't have to get there in order to grow something great. So with Austin, who's, best friend and business partner, I bring more visionary. He brings more integrator, operator type. We work together with fast growing companies. We help them with a framework because that's table stakes, right? You need a system to grow your business, EOS, System and Soul, Gazelles, scaling up, whatever. There's a bunch of different systems. We focus a lot on the soul, which is the person, the health of the people. The most effective leaders, it's not about them being visionary or great communicators or tactical stuff. It's are they inwardly sound and others focused? Can I get to where like I care more? Is this me being on a podcast? Is this me about promoting Skip? Or is it, I hope that out of whatever, somebody walks with something that goes, ooh, yeah, it sounds like Skip's been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Like, you don't need to go there. So it's an interesting part. God's been showing me, like, what do I do now? I'm redeeming my story, or like he's redeeming my story and helping other people thrive. And that's our passion. And I don't know where it's all going to go, but I'm having fun serving some people and getting to remain on the discovery of going, who's Skip uniquely? How does he love and lead well? And right at the moment, I just kind of say yes to things that God brings that fit that. And I'm getting better at saying no to the opportunity. Not every open door is one that you're supposed to walk to. So sometimes the open doors that I'm walking through are the ones that are actually least beneficial today for my paycheck or my, balance sheet, and more about who I'm becoming. And I'm trusting that God is going to get me to a spot. You said kingdom, so I know we got to wrap up. But in becoming a king, can I become the kind of man that God can entrust more of his kingdom? Your kingdom is simply your domain. So my kingdom involves my home, my household, my family, maybe some rental properties and the farm up north. Like, and it's my skill set, it's my touch, that's my kingdom. Am I a good king, or am I a kind of king that's a tyrant? So am I becoming the kind of king that God almost can't help but say, I want to entrust you with more of my kingdom, because I know that entrusted with much, you're going to do well with it, versus be a narcissist, which I had that word put on me, right? So,
wow, that's incredible.
That's
Sounds to me like you're a stewardpreneur, someone doing the best right things with what they've been given.
God's entrusted us with much.
Yes.
Am I in business or ministry? Yes. How do we take what's in our hand, and even with his guidance, ask? Or
and listening, and even in that, the things we're afraid he might ask us as you continue to practice that and trust. And you said something, I'm going to find this book before you go if I can. Absolute Surrender was a book that crushed me. And it was like, that's the difference. It's not the gray.
Yeah.
It's not the lukewarm. It's in the all in.
Yeah.
It's in the, I laid at his feet. And you know what? That even meant for me more recently that I had to defer my own company to the hands of others. And I frankly was scared of that for the longest time, because I thought if I can't do it, it's not mine. And if I have to give it to someone else, then I'm not in control. And I had to learn a skill. That was I was afraid of.
Yep.
I was afraid of giving over control and trusting someone. And so it started with the Lord finally, in my mind, me understanding, he was saying, do you trust me in this? So as you share your journey in this, it's just incredible to bring it full circle. And some of the things you've learned, the lessons learned, that you might be able to steward all of your kingdom and point people to Jesus in life and business, in marriage and in parenting, in successfully growing a wealth management company, to helping a nonprofit of your own or others with men or women that are also charged with the same task of stewarding. And guess what? The body is stronger when our parts come together. That's why if the thumb is, if you're only a thumb, good luck, thumb buddy.
You bet.
But that's the reality, right? So thank you today, Skip. I get to see another brother, another part of the body that gets to come together and really just share the mutual pain that we face, temporarily pain, but working through that, the redemptive awareness of our own journey and in his good grace. Amen. So appreciate you today, brother. So great to chat with you. This is an exciting time to just sit down. And in my mind, wanted to do this, and maybe we'll see at the next whatever. But this has been an exciting episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. Skip Johnson here. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks.